The Vietnam War was a long and costly conflict, stretching from the mid-1950s until 1975. It was fought in the dense jungles, rice paddies, and cities of Vietnam, a country thousands of miles away from the United States. For many Americans, it was a war in a distant land, but for the Vietnamese, it was a struggle that touched every village, every family, and every generation. The war's battles were not just fought with guns and bombs, but also with ideas, beliefs, and the hope for a better future. The Vietnam War deeply affected both Vietnam and the United States, leaving scars that would last for generations. In Vietnam, millions of civilians and soldiers lost their lives and entire communities were uprooted. The landscape itself was changed by years of fighting, with forests destroyed and villages reduced to rubble. In the United States, the war sparked fierce debates, protests, and a crisis of confidence in government. Families were divided, and returning veterans often struggled to find their place in a society that was deeply conflicted about the war. Understanding this war helps us learn from the past. By studying the Vietnam War, we can see how decisions made by leaders, the influence of global politics, and the voices of ordinary people all shaped the course of history. It reminds us of the importance of questioning authority, seeking the truth, and remembering the human cost of conflict. The lessons of Vietnam continue to influence how we think about war, peace, and the responsibilities of nations today. This essay explores the war's origins, key events, and lasting impact. We will look at how the conflict began, the major battles and turning points, and the ways in which the war changed both Vietnam and the world. By examining the stories of those who lived through it, soldiers, civilians, leaders, and protesters, we gain a deeper understanding of why the Vietnam War remains such a powerful and controversial chapter in history. The war was complex and involved many countries. While it was fought mainly in Vietnam, the conflict drew in powerful nations like the United States, the Soviet Union, and China, each with their own interests and goals. Allies from South Korea, Australia, and other countries also sent troops. The Vietnam War became a battleground for the larger struggle between communism and democracy, making it a key episode in the Cold War. However, at its heart, it was a fight for control of Vietnam. The country was divided into North and South, with each side backed by different allies and ideologies. For many Vietnamese, the war was about more than politics. It was about the right to decide their own future, to reunite their country, and to live free from foreign domination. The Vietnamese people wanted independence, but outside forces intervened, turning their struggle into a global conflict. Decades earlier, Vietnam had fought for freedom from French colonial rule. When the French left, new powers stepped in, each hoping to shape Vietnam's future according to their own interests. The dreams of ordinary people were often caught between the ambitions of powerful nations. This outside interference led to decades of conflict, suffering, and loss. Yet, even in the darkest times, the resilience of the Vietnamese people shone through. Today, the legacy of the Vietnam War continues to shape the lives of millions, reminding us of the costs of war and the enduring hope for peace. In the aftermath of World War II, the world was reshaping itself, and Vietnam, a small country in Southeast Asia, found itself at a crossroads. For decades, Vietnam had been under French colonial rule, its people yearning for freedom and self-determination. The war had left the country battered, but it also ignited a powerful desire for change among the Vietnamese population. As the dust settled, the question of who would control Vietnam's future became more urgent than ever. Amidst this uncertainty, a charismatic and determined leader emerged, Ho Chi Minh. Inspired by the ideals of communism and national liberation, Ho Chi Minh rallied the Viet Minh, a coalition of nationalist and communist fighters, to challenge French authority. Under his leadership, the Viet Minh waged a relentless campaign for independence, drawing support from peasants, workers, and intellectuals alike. Ho Chi Minh became a symbol of hope for many, promising a new era free from colonial oppression. The struggle for independence soon transformed into a broader ideological battle. In the north, Ho Chi Minh and his followers envisioned a unified Vietnam governed by communist principles. They believed that only through unity and socialism could the country truly break free from foreign domination and achieve prosperity for all its people. The North's vision was bold and uncompromising, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation with opposing forces. Meanwhile, in the South, a very different vision for Vietnam was taking shape. Supported by the United States and other Western powers, the South Vietnamese government sought to build a nation rooted in anti-communist ideals and closer ties to the West. American advisors and military personnel became a common sight in Saigon, as the United States aimed to prevent the spread of communism in Asia. The South's leaders feared that a communist takeover would threaten their way of life and the region's stability. The country was now split in two, divided at the 17th parallel. Barbed wire, military checkpoints, and a tense demilitarized zone marked the boundary between North and South. This division was not just a line on a map. It represented a deep ideological rift, fueled by global superpowers and conflicting dreams for Vietnam's future. These seeds of conflict would soon grow into one of the most devastating wars of the 20th century, forever shaping the destiny of Vietnam and its people. Initially, the United States provided military advisors to South Vietnam. However, America's involvement escalated after the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964. The incident, which involved alleged attacks on United States Navy ships, led to increased United States military presence in Vietnam. What began as support for South Vietnam transformed into a full-fledged war for the United States. The Vietnam War was unlike previous wars. The jungle terrain made traditional warfare difficult. Guerrilla tactics employed by the Viet Cong, the communist force in South Vietnam, proved highly effective. Key battles such as the Tet Offensive challenged American assumptions about the war. The Tet Offensive, though a military defeat for the communists, revealed the resilience and reach of the Viet Cong. The Vietnam War, exacted a heavy toll on both soldiers and civilians. Millions of Vietnamese civilians were killed or injured. The war left lasting scars on the land and its people. American soldiers also suffered greatly. Many returned home with physical and psychological wounds. The war's impact on veterans honestly continues to this day. As the Vietnam War dragged on through the late 1960s and into the early 1970s, the mood in the United States began to shift dramatically. What had once been a conflict supported by many Americans, who believed in the fight against communism, slowly became a source of national anxiety and division. Every night, families across the country watched grim news reports on their televisions, showing images of distant jungles, wounded soldiers, and the mounting toll of casualties. Newspapers were filled with headlines about battles, bombings, and the growing number of young Americans who would never return home. The war, once distant, now felt painfully close to home for millions of people. As the reality of the conflict became clearer, anti-war protests began to sweep across the nation. What started as small gatherings on college campuses soon grew into massive demonstrations in major cities. People from all walks of life, students, veterans, parents, and even some politicians, joined together to voice their opposition to the war. Marches filled the streets of Washington, D.C., New York, San Francisco, and countless other cities, with protesters carrying signs and chanting for peace. The anti-war movement became a powerful force, influencing public opinion and putting pressure on government leaders to find a way out of the conflict. Across the country, people began to question the war's purpose and the heavy price being paid. Families worried about loved ones serving overseas, and many Americans wondered if the sacrifices were worth it. The nightly news brought images of protests, interviews with grieving families, and stories of soldiers returning home changed forever. The question on everyone's mind was simple: why was the United States still fighting in Vietnam, and what would it take to bring the troops home? After years of mounting pressure and growing unrest, a turning point finally arrived. In January 1973, representatives from the United States, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and the Viet Cong gathered in Paris to sign a peace agreement. The Paris Peace Accords called for a ceasefire and the withdrawal of American troops from Vietnam. Over the following months, U.S. soldiers boarded planes and helicopters, leaving behind a country still deeply divided and scarred by years of war. For many Americans, the withdrawal marked the end of a painful chapter, but it also left behind a sense of uncertainty about what would happen next in Vietnam. Despite the peace agreement, the fighting in Vietnam did not end. North and South Vietnamese forces continued to battle for control, and the violence only intensified after the departure of American troops. Cities and villages across South Vietnam were caught in the crossfire, with many civilians suffering the consequences of the ongoing conflict. The war, which had already lasted for nearly 2 decades, seemed far from over for the people of Vietnam. In April 1975, the world watched as North Vietnamese tanks rolled into Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. Helicopters frantically evacuated American personnel and desperate South Vietnamese citizens from rooftops, while crowds gathered outside the U.S. Embassy, hoping for a way out. The fall of Saigon marked the official end of the Vietnam War, bringing a close to one of the most turbulent and divisive chapters in American and Vietnamese history. The images of that day, of chaos, fear, and loss, remain etched in the memories of all who witnessed them, symbolizing the true cost of war and the enduring desire for peace. The Vietnam War had a profound impact on both Vietnam and the United States. Vietnam faced the daunting task of reunification and rebuilding its shattered infrastructure. The United States grappled with the war's legacy, including its impact on veterans and the divisions it created within American society. Despite the war's devastation, Vietnam has made remarkable progress in recent decades. The country has transitioned to a market economy and experienced significant economic growth. Vietnam is now a popular tourist destination, known for its beautiful landscapes, vibrant culture, and resilient people. The Vietnam War holds important lessons about the complexities of international conflict. It reminds us of the human cost of war and the importance of diplomacy and peaceful solutions. The war's legacy continues to shape United States foreign policy and serves as a reminder of the need for careful consideration before engaging in military interventions.